the reality is when you take that ownership, people do see you. They start to see you as the expert. You said, this is what we're going to do. Not that you can't have any flexibility. I'm not saying like you have to be so crazy rigid, but if you're like, this is my process, people do actually respect you more. Welcome to the Her First podcast, a platform to help online business owners, coaches, and creators gain the confidence needed to build a successful business while creating a sustainable lifestyle balance. We are here to help you prioritize yourself in business and life. I'm Joanna Newton.
And I'm Michelle Puolani. In this podcast, along with the Her First Collective, you can engage in the challenges women face in business, ways to increase your impact or income online, and how to make it all work while launching, scaling, or maintaining. Spoiler, it's not about perfectionism, hustling, or a copy-paste methodology. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to Her First. Today, we are talking about a topic that is sort of near and dear to my heart, which is client communication. If you work with clients, if you have a service business where you're talking to people, delivering services on a regular basis, communication is the key to having a successful service or a not successful service. You can be the best at what you do, but be bad at communication and you can fail. You can honestly probably be pretty mediocre at what you do, but if your communication, your ability to set expectations, your ability to communicate with that client are good, you can have a lot of success. So today we're going to break down just some of the pieces that make for really, really great client communication. And a lot of what I'm going to be sharing is really the SOP of how I run my business that services dozens of new clients a month we bring into our system, provide services for, and offer things at a very high level. And this is what we do at Millennial Marketer, my company, to make sure clients are communicated with every single time at a high level.
Communication is a key skill that you should be developing in your business in general. Communication comes down to your copy, your content, how you're showing up in meetings, sales pitches, when you actually onboard the client, as we're going to talk about today, and everything that comes afterwards, how you're connecting with your people via email, how you're communicating on coaching calls, how you're working with your team members and colleagues and being able to deliver on coaching services that you are offering. Like it's all across the board, an incredibly helpful and key skill as you start to evolve your business and something that you should learn to practice in a lot of different avenues. And this particular focus that we have today with client communication is huge. If you're a freelancer, if you're a coach, if you're an agency, if you're providing any service that actually deals with people, which I'm assuming you do, then this is going to be huge for you. And it's really going to help you think about not just the practical and tangible strategies, but some of the soft skills around communication that can help you show up with more confidence, allow you to connect better, and allow you to grow and scale your business, because people are not only going to trust, respect, and work with you longer, but they're also going to feel more comfortable referring you out to other people when your communication skills are at their best.
And great client communication, effective client communication starts way before they're a client. And this is one piece that is sometimes really hard to think about. But client communication truly starts in your sales process. So when you're doing a discovery call with a client, figuring out their proposal, you have to be super effective at communicating what you're offering them, what that proposal is, what those deliverables are, what those expected results are, really, truly accurately. And I know sometimes as a salesperson, you do need to sell, but you have to sell something that you can deliver on or your team can deliver on to be able to set your team up for success, right? You want to make sure that what is sold is what is delivered, and being able to communicate in that sales process things like the expectations for timelines, real life examples of similar things that they can expect to see, being able to outline really clear deliverables, really clear contracts, setting actually realistic expectations. being able to set the stage in that sales process for what you're going to deliver is really super important. And then you also need to do that in a way that is shareable with your team. If you're selling but not actually servicing, you need to be able to communicate the exact deliverables with your team. And we can talk about some easy ways to do that, but know that this starts with sales. And if anyone is listening that has worked in the corporate world, you know there's this like age-old tension between sales and ops. Always this like weird struggle because especially when you're working in this like corporate environment, sometimes sales will say things that you can't deliver on. So they'll sell it. If it gets passed on to you in operations to deliver, you're like, wait, we don't do that. And then in there, in that moment, you either as the operator have to figure out how to do something that you have never done before, or if you're in a super corporate environment and can't change your services, have to tell the client in the first call, your first iteration, actually, we can't provide that. We don't do that. That can be a really hard way to set the stage. So sales is super important to actually sell things that can be delivered on in the operation side of things.
It's a breakdown of communication that's happened between team members, the example that you're giving. And that can happen internally, sometimes with yourself, and you think, like, oh, maybe I would never get into this situation because I'm the one who handles the sales and then I'm the one who handles the delivery. Or I have like a very close knit team and we know what we do and we're clear on that. But what the result is of that experience is a failed customer opportunity, a failed customer experience that they're having where they now feel like they haven't been taken care of, they're not getting the services they want. And if you can think of an experience in which you've had a bad customer experience, whether for yourself or if you have clients that you've worked with in the past and just thought like, oh, this was a heinous client, they asked for things that we couldn't deliver on or anything else, think about what role you had in that experience. Did you set the expectations? Do you have clear contracts in place? Did you hold the boundaries? You know, we hear all about clients who overstep, whether they're contacting you on weekends or nights, or they expect you to have a really quick turnaround time when you have a specific lead time that's already set out. All of those things can come down to a breakdown in the communication. And so we're encouraging you to look at your systems and the way that you operate, whether that is on a solo basis or whether that is on a team basis, and say, how can I put the best foot forward, have these systems in place, and take the initiative so that I can either avoid these situations or easily remedy them so that my clients have the best experience possible? And I think open and honest communication is a big part of that, even if there is a breakdown, and being able to kind of own up to your responsibility in the matter, what you either failed to do or can't do or are going to shift in order to do. Whatever it is that you're, approaching this situation with in terms of the mentality, what is your responsibility and how can you best avoid the conflict that could possibly arise because of the breakdown in communication?
Yeah, and a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is how to be proactive to prevent some of that communication breakdown from happening in the first place. There's always going to be some, like, there's always going to be confusion points. Like, that's just the reality. But there are things that you can prepare for and be proactive about to prevent it from happening in the first place. And one thing I recommend doing if even if you are sales and service, even if you're a solopreneur doing all of this by yourself, when you have your sales hat on and when you have your service hat on, it can feel like two very different things. But one way I think you can prevent this sort of confusion between sales and service is by standardizing your packages. So if you're a social media manager, as an example, and you offer 3 different packages, and they each include different things, when you're selling it, you can very easily make sure you're providing the right service to the right person if it happens every time. If you're selling it and passing it off to your team and say, okay, this is social media package C, then that person knows what's involved in social media package C. So when they start providing the service, the sales and the service is going to match. Every time you're selling a service, you're coming up with a new custom package every time. That's where deliverables, when you pass from sales to service, are likely going to break down because one of those things are going to get missed because you don't have a system or process for it in the world. So when you're selling and as you grow your business, finding ways to sort of productize and systematize, is that a word, systematize? I don't know, it is now. Your services will help with that sales ops pass off.
And this applies to digital products too, and other ways of approaching whatever business it is that you're focusing on. Obviously, we talk a lot about content creation and coaches and people in the digital space who offer either a service from an agency perspective or digital products, something that is available via coaching or programs or communities or memberships or things like that. But this can apply to a lot of different principles. So being able to hand things off, again, if you are a solopreneur just working within your own domain, you have the pages, you deal with the emails, you deal with the actual product and program delivery, whether that's on Kajabi or a similar platform, and you're actually showing up, you're doing the coaching calls, or again, whether you have a more robust team, being able to clearly communicate, disseminate the information, and cascade what needs to happen is such an important part of this process. And I have seen a lot of the breakdown when it comes to that type of communication. And again, what starts to happen is, well, you should have done this. Well, I said this. Well, isn't it supposed to be like this? Well, and it can come from the client, it can come from your team members, it can be internally even for yourself is like, wait, what did I say that I was going to do? What is that supposed to offer? And so really taking the time, and I know it's something that's arduous, it can feel boring, it can feel frustrating because I know you want to be in that creation space and getting things out into the world, but sometimes going back to the drawing board, looking at your back end and clearly delineating the customer journey steps for that prospect when they first come into your world versus when they actually book or opt into something for you versus when you actually sell them into something, and then the delivery of that and then the nurture is like really looking at those steps from a communication perspective. How are you communicating with the client? And then how are your team members or yourself supporting that? And what are you responsible for? And how are you ensuring that that consistency is there?
It's so good to always look at your customer journey, right? And it can feel tedious. But one really quick example that was really helpful for my business is when we were getting started and growing our team. Sometimes as clients worked with different people of our team, there was a little bit of tension because it's almost like they were seeing us as individual freelancers and not a company of people. So when they would get on a call with a new person, it would almost feel like sometimes it would happen with me. Someone would get on a call with me and I felt like all of a sudden I had to sell myself all over again because we weren't early on properly setting up in the sales process, in the marketing process, who everyone was, what they do. And so when they'd show up with you, they'd be confused. We did some things in our process. We created some welcome video content for our clients that included that information. We have different people that do these different things. So now as clients are moving around to new people, their assumption is that that person is an expert. So I've set them up for success rather than set them not up for success, right? And that came from us kind of seeing this tension happening and saying hey, what can we do again proactively rather than having to do it after the fact? How can we set that up for success? And really thinking about that handoff, right? A service gets sold and now we have to service it. We have to create that. And that sales ops handoff is super important. Making sure all of the details of the client's needs that came up in the sales process get passed to the operators is super important. If you're a solopreneur, you need to document. You might be sales and service, but you need to document everything so that you can go back and reference and remember. You will, as much as you think you will not remember what you talked about in that discovery call in 3 months. Maybe even sometimes in 3 days. You need to document. And what we do is we have a main client tracker and we have a main sales tracker. And in our sales tracker, we keep all of our notes. We keep the information about the client, their website, who they are, what their niche is, what their scope of work is. And then all of that gets passed to our project manager when a client is closed. So that project manager has access to everything. And actually, our whole team has access to all of those things. So we can easily pass information from one stage to the next. And we created a system to make it happen super easily and not take a lot of time, but it's important to make sure you have that step where you're sharing all of the details with the team that's going to service the client.
I'll share an example of how this is so important. Again, not just for ensuring that the customer has a good experience when they onboard, but to continue to get their business over time, depending on the service and the programs that you offer, which you should have some sort of continuing model or some sort of ascension model in which when you bring on a client, you're able to pass them through different services so they don't just come on board, buy one thing from you, and then go away. We all know from a marketing perspective, and if you don't yet, you're about to, that it's much more expensive to acquire a new customer than obviously to sell a current customer on something different. So you're going to spend a lot more money up front to get that client, to get that customer in the door. And then if you can continue to nurture them via putting them into channels that are going to continue to serve them over time, that's a much healthier business model so that you increase the lifetime value of your customer. So I was working with a client once and we had done a lot of general business consulting when it came to migration to Kajabi, when we were looking at social media strategy, sales development, like we'd done a lot of things across the board. I worked with them for about 2 years. And part of my transition away was to actually help find them and then secure and have onboarded with an ads agency. An ads agency that was designed to help them run paid ads, specifically on Facebook, as well as design, develop, create, and help them tweak or change any of the related digital funnels around what they did. Now, they had a very core offer, and they also had some digital products and like multi-level coaching programs and then a membership. So they had everything in place in order to be successful. When we first started with this company that came very highly recommended, I'd seen them in the industry for a long time. They weren't new, and they kind of operated from like more of a heart-centered approach, and they had everything seemed nice and good and shiny from the front side of things. And they're not bad people. They're not a bad agency. But when we initially got onboarded, our experience going from sales to our first like assessment, initial like get all the details was so imbalanced. Like it was done so poorly that we thought about stopping working with them right then. And we probably actually should have based on what ended up being delivered over time. But there was such a discrepancy in how we were being sold by one person and then the operational and like onboarding side of things. And this is not a cheap service. I think it was like about $3,000 to $5,000 a month, and we were paying ad spend on top of that. So that experience just goes to show you that at every single level, there can be improvements to be made, and that it's so critically important, which they've stopped working with that service now, but it's so critically important to be able to cater to that client coming in and meet their needs. And I really, truly believe that over communication is always better, as much as you possibly can. And as much as you think in your head, you've spelled it out, you've got the contracts, you've got everything in writing, someone's coming in from a totally different perspective and they have other priorities that they're focusing on. It's just like content creation, right? You get tired of saying the same things over and over and over again, and someone may not even know what you do. So you have to look at it from that like clean slate perspective, as if you need to spell everything out as detailed, as clearly as possible, and go above and beyond. And it seems like a lot, but it's actually not a lot of effort. And it makes all the difference in that client reception and their ability to trust and respect and want to continue working with you, even if you make mistakes. So if someone sees the value of how you're communicating and your honesty and your transparency and your ability to work with them, that'll overrule any issues that you had.
Onboarding is so key here. Having a successful onboarding process and onboarding experience will do so much for you. It's going to set the stage. Make sure you have everything you need to do the job. Make sure the client knows what's going on, the process, all of the things that happen in onboarding are so critical. It's also an opportunity for you to continue your branding, making sure how you're positioning yourself to your client, making sure they know the other things that you offer, really setting the whole experience up for success. Your sales function brings them in, but your onboarding is going to set the stage for how that's going to work, right? And if onboarding is really strong and there's a little if you're creating like specific deliverables for clients, you're always going to create something they don't like sometimes. That's just like the reality. If onboarding is really strong and they feel comfortable and they feel trusted, if you deliver something they're not happy with, they're going to work with you and give you feedback. And because they're going to trust that you have the ability to make those adjustments and do those things. If you did onboarding poorly and you deliver something they don't love, they might just be out. They might not take that time because they don't have a relationship with you. So onboarding is honestly probably more important than the deliverables themselves in a way, because you're really setting up the project for success. And we have I've created a very streamlined onboarding approach that helps us get it right every single time. Once we get a new client, they get a welcome email with some really specific information, action items for them to take. We actually built an entire Kajabi onboarding course with like professionally created videos that welcome our clients, talk to them about who our team is. We have a whole video about client communication, like how we're going to communicate, what we're going to do. We have video content walking them through their onboarding checklist items. And we do not move forward with anybody's project until they've completed their onboarding fully. So we get things like branding details. We get access to their Kajabi account because we work within Kajabi. There's just this like list of things that we're like, this has to be done or else we're not going to start your project. And we of course say that in a very nice way. But we know, and the reason we do that, we know if those things aren't done in advance, it could cause delays in the project deliverables. One silly example, if you don't have your Kajabi payment integration set up, you can't make checkout pages. So if a client doesn't do that and they have a tight turnaround time and then the sales page is ready and we can't make that checkout page, and then they're scrambling to get everything connected, and then they have an issue with the bank that day and it takes 3 extra days, and then their launch delays. It happens. So we say, no, we're not building that sales page until your payment integration is set up, because we actually know that's best for you and best for us. It's best for all of us if these things are done. And being really specific with that onboarding process has made such a difference in our business. And now everybody's onboarding process is going to look a little bit different, but having a process and thinking about what you need in advance is going to make such a huge difference.
And I want to comment here on sometimes we have trepidation. We don't want to feel like we're burdening our clients, or we don't want to feel like we're asking too much of them, or maybe they won't work with us if we have all of these expectations and these contracts in place. But the important thing here is to recognize how they do benefit you and they benefit the client, like Joanna's saying. If someone's launch is delayed by 3 days and they're really upset about that, but you've clearly articulated that these things need to be in place, like that's a situation in which you can avoid. And people hire us because we're solving problems for them and can help guide them in the best way possible. And they're going to, again, trust and respect you and appreciate that you're offering a service that is above and beyond what they've experienced before. So if you can deliver on all of these things, set the expectation, and really have confidence in why you're doing it. Don't just set expectations or create an onboarding process that has nothing to do with the deliverable or what it is that you're doing or why it's important. You have to understand that. Joanna knows that this Kajabi payment system has to be linked because otherwise we can't fulfill on the checkout page. So it doesn't make sense for us to move on. There's a reason behind it, and it makes sense for the client, and it's going to protect the client in the long run. So if there's anything on your checklist that you're not sure about, either figure out why it needs to be there or take it off. That way you can stand fully behind what it is that you're doing. And when you approach that client and you speak to them in that candid, honest and truthful way, letting them know that, look, I have your best interest at heart here. The reason I put these practices in place are to ensure that you benefit in this, and this way. And when they see it from that perspective, again, they're going to want to invest in you and keep investing in you. So be able to, again, show up with that confidence and just bring it to the forefront of grounding in why it is that you're doing it and ensuring that the client knows that. Communication.
Yeah. And if you're positioning yourself as an expert, you're saying to them, I am going to guide you to get this end result. You want this end result? It is my job to guide you there. And in that onboarding process, by setting those boundaries, setting those expectations, you're putting yourself in the driver's seat versus it have their job to be the driver's seat. Now, sometimes your role is not being in the driver's seat, but those are going to end up being lower end services, being a virtual assistant, being, assistant where you are delivering on their tasks that you're giving you. But in this world where you're the expert, they're paying for your strategic expertise. You set the stage of what those standards are. And that helps with your branding. It actually helps when you say, this is our process, period. It kind of sets the stage that you're the expert and you're going to provide on that service. The next thing I always recommend doing to help in the communication is having a dedicated kickoff call. You can call it whatever you want, but have a call where the goal has nothing to do with your deliverables. The call is to ensure onboarding steps are done, to ensure that they fully understand the project deliverables and they understand the process for those project deliverables. So you're not going to be making anything, talking about making anything, doing anything. You're making sure everything is clear. Hey, this is the process. We're going to build your sales page. First, you're going to do this. Then you're going to do this. Then it's this. Then it's this. This is how you get it. Give an overview of the project. If it's a retainer client, say, oh, we've got to schedule our monthly meeting because we have one meeting a month. And then these are the next steps. You're just letting them know and having dedicated time to set the stage up for whatever service you're delivering. So the focus here is onboarding, expectation setting, how you communicate, share your office hours. We only send emails Tuesday through Thursday. Whatever it is for you, you're setting that stage in that first kickoff call.
This can also translate really well to your sales activities. So when you're really clear about your process and really clear on your deliverables, you can communicate that and break down part of that barrier. There's a lot of trepidation from prospective clients and audience members if they see content that they like, say on social media, and they're interested in hiring a social media manager, or they're interested in hiring a digital agency to create a funnel for them, or someone to develop a course, or whatever that case is. Maybe you've been following someone for a while, you like what they do, but you don't really understand how they work with people. The more that you can fill in that information up front and give examples. So, what it's like to start working with me, or how I onboarded my last client, or what this specific client accomplished with me. And then you break that down and you say, this is what to expect on our first call. This is how I'm going to take you through this process. That type of preparation, forethought, and ability to deliver at a higher level is going to help distinguish you from your competition and encourage your audience to take that next step with you. Sometimes I've been looking for contractors or been looking for services, and I just want to know the price and their process, because I'm at a point where I don't need the discovery call. I don't need to sit in a place of oh, well, what are your goals and outcomes? What are you working toward? And, oh, I can help you solve these challenges and these pain points. I'm not saying there's not a place for that, but I'm at a very different mindset and level in my business where I'm just I know what I need. I know what I'm looking to accomplish. And I just need to figure out if you're going to be the best service for me. So the more transparency that can be there up front in that process and how you're going to deliver on what it is that I want is super helpful for my decision-making process as a prospective buyer or client.
I think if you're a service provider, you can feel some of what I'm saying might sound scary. You're I can't tell the clients what to do. I need to do what they want me to do. And I get that is. And I would say I was in that position at one point in my journey as a service provider. But the reality is when you take that ownership, people do see you. They start to see you as the expert. You said, this is what we're going to do. Not that you can't have any flexibility. I'm not saying you have to be so crazy rigid, but if you're this is my process, people do actually respect you more. And I think they even value you at a higher level because you're saying, no, this is the best way for us to do this. We're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. And you just have to help them see that big picture, that their end product is going to come at the end. Because at the end of the day, if you're building a website, as an example, someone's coming to you because they don't know how to build a website. They might have an idea in their head of the most efficient steps to do it. And if you go follow your process, it's probably not as efficient as your process. And you just have to be comfortable saying like, nope, this is what we're going to do first. This works every time. We're going to start here and then we're going to do this and then we're going to do this. And I promise you, I know it might be hard to see the long-term vision right now. I promise you at the end, it will all make more sense. And if you can have that confidence, that really, really helps setting the stage up for success.
Yeah, and not being afraid of what it is that you do. Sometimes that takes time. And I want to highlight one point is that you might think that, oh, I have to have all of this worked out in advance. I've got to have the steps in place. I've got to have the forms. I've got to have the contracts. And that's not necessarily the case. If you're just getting started or you've had a handful of clients, or if you're pivoting and offering something different, it's okay to take someone through the process, be transparent about the fact that it's evolving as you go, and that then you're going to take what you've done and then be able to replicate it, systematize it, automate it. So it might be that that form that you have up front is just an email full of questions that you're figuring out as you go. I want to ask them this. And then each time you iterate, you're going to learn and you're going to adjust and you're going to tweak. So just don't think that you have to have this all figured out from the very beginning in the get-go. Know that it can be something that evolves with you as you deliver on what you do. So don't think that this is keeping you from acquiring clients or a new product or new program. Like the best thing is to get out and sell it first, but then know that within that first bunch, the first 5 folks that maybe come through, is start to iterate on this so that it can improve your process over time.
Definitely. Always iterating, always improving. That's how you scale and that's how you grow efficiency for what you do. The next piece that I want to talk about is feedback is hard and hard to manage. And this is an area where a lot of times projects can get breakdown. You've built your initial thing, you're sharing it for review, and then things go haywire. And there are a couple of reasons that I think things can go haywire here. One, if you didn't set expectations properly, you didn't understand the client's brand guidelines, right? If you didn't do all of the things that we already talked about doing, the feedback probably won't go very well. If you don't have their logo and their colors and you just build them a site and they're like, this is not my brand, that's a problem. But in that feedback process, the other thing that comes into play is that people aren't always inherently good at explaining what they do, what they don't like, what they want changed. Now, I have a corporate background. I worked in marketing. I have given feedback on so many emails, so many landing pages, so many things. I can look at something and say, okay, we need to change these 5 things and it's going to be better. But not everybody can do that. A lot of people will say, I like it or I don't like it. And they can't actually articulate how to do that. So we have to, as the service provider, help them give better feedback. And so that comes with communicating with people how to give feedback and providing them with a tool to be able to give feedback. So, as an example, if we've edited videos, a service that you might provide, you've edited a video with someone and you just share them a video in a Google Doc and say, hey, client, let me know what you think. With no guidelines, no directions, anything. What do you think you'll get back? You'll get back maybe a Word doc of notes, an email with a lot of things. How are you going to get that to your editor to actually implement the changes? You've just created a mess for yourself. Instead, as an example, we use a tool called Frame. And Frame is something you can upload a video to, and people can leave inline time-stamped feedback. So they can say, hey, I don't like this B-roll, or hey, I caught a typo, or can you use this color instead of this color inline so it's tracked. Now you've set up a system where they can provide feedback in a structured way. You can pass that to your editor and everyone is on the same page. And when you provide that with them, you want to give them instructions on how to give feedback and say, hey, this is the first draft. We know there'll be more additions, right? Set them up to not expect it to be the final draft if it isn't, and say, please go ahead, leave inline comments in Frame and let me know what you want to change. If you want to see a different piece of, give them examples so they have an idea of what they should be doing, and tell them when you're done adding all of your feedback, let me know. And there you've set the stage. If you just say, give me feedback, you're going to get an email here, a Word doc here. It's all going to be in different places and there's not going to be any structure. It's going to be hard for you to fix everything they want fixed if you don't provide that structure for them.
I was just actually having this conversation with someone who hired a graphic designer. The graphic designer was doing their logo and brand design as well as putting together like a social media kit. And they were expressing to me, it's not as good as I want it to be, and I don't really like. And I could just tell based off what this person was telling me that they weren't clearly articulating their needs to the designer and the freelancer. And whether it was the freelancer not asking specific questions for feedback in terms of is the color palette on point? Would you like to see softer images? Are the images related to the brand or do you think that they're too vague? Like specific questions that's going to help them think about how they're providing that feedback is going to be so helpful. And so my response to this person was to say, okay, put yourself in their shoes and think about the language that you're going to use to be able to provide the feedback. How are you going to describe what it is that you're looking for? How would you describe the outcome of what you want the person to feel by seeing these graphics? So, starting to think about how you can clearly gain that feedback and then paying attention to the feedback. I think that's a big part of communication is people will ask for feedback. And if you're the one delivering the service, right? You're working with your client and you got feedback from the client, you need to be able to know how to interpret that feedback and then put it into action and actually pay attention to that. Say, for example, you have products and programs, or you're doing a beta run of a program that you're launching. Being able to get the right kind of feedback by cultivating these questions and then being able to implement and make shifts and changes to meet their needs so that you can improve the marketing, improve the offer, improve the product or program delivery of what it is that you're doing is so incredibly helpful. So, taking the time to actually look at the feedback, interpret it, and then be able to actually put it into place is a big part of the feedback process as well.
The other sort of fringe benefit of having a very strategic and documented feedback process is it can help with problem clients. So, obviously, everyone wants to have dream clients who are always happy, never cause problems. But sometimes clients change their mind, aren't always super self aware at what they're asking for. So, in the example of the videos we're talking about, you create a video, you put all of give you all of their feedback, they document it, you make all of the changes, you send it back to them, and they unmake all of the changes that you made. These things happen. If you make stuff for clients, like these are real things that have happened to me. And you're like, "What? Everything was blue and you said you wanted everything green and then I give it to you green and you're mad that it's green. Like what just happened?" And it puts you in a position, not in a finger blaming way. Like you can just say like, "Hey, I hear you. You're unhappy it's green. I have here in the frame comments from August 25th where you asked us to change it from blue to green. We're happy to change it back to blue. I just want to make sure that that's what you want," right? It just sets you up in a position and it actually is sort of less finger pointy than saying you said you wanted it green because that's kind of, but you say like, "Hey, my notes here show this. Is there a reason we've changed our mind?" You can actually approach those things in a much softer way when it's laid out and when it's documented. "We made this change because you requested it," or you saying you want to change back. It just puts you in that position where you can clarify those things in a way that's very professional and very focused. And then the client can either say, "Oh yeah, I keep changing my mind. I'm sorry. I do want it this way," right? Like it just puts you in a good position.
I agree. I think having a log of what it is that you do and what it is that was decided upon is always helpful. And you can always follow up with that too. I think when I have worked with service providers in the past, being able to have some sort of summary of the important decisions then delivered to me is always super helpful. So when you're hopping on a call and you're going over things, or whether you've gotten feedback in review, communication, like we're all operating off of our own lens and perspective and the way in which we see the world and what we think of things. And so there are going to be communication breakdowns. And so that again, the more you can over communicate, the more helpful it will be with the process. So if you've had a call, if you've had a meeting, if you've had a video sent over, shooting back an email and just highlighting, these are the main things that we decided upon and that I'm going to move forward with. Are you in agreement? Or is there anything you'd like to see changed? And then you can be able to catch those kinds of things. So sometimes following up with that from a list perspective, or archiving your meeting notes, or doing something that helps you track those decisions and what was said is super helpful. That being said, I also have had clients who have just been like totally like, I don't even know what's going on with their heads. And I'm like, you literally told me this. And then here it is. It just like some clients are just going to be like that. And you know what? It's okay to also have that boundary and say, this isn't a great working relationship. I think I'm going to move forward and move on. So save your sanity if that happens to be the case, and trust and respect your intuition and your gut feeling if those clients aren't serving you, because you will find alternative clients out there who are wonderful to work with and who do really work well with you.
And keeping all of that communication is also good for you and your team and your processes. I recently had a communication breakdown on something with a client, and it was resolved and the details honestly don't matter, but I was able to look back at every piece of the process because I wanted to see, was this our error? Did we miss something? Like, what happened? From a not a finger pointing perspective, but like, what happened here? How did this get missed? And when you document everything, you can see that and you can see where it came down, and then you can figure out potentially how to, I mean, yes, some clients are just difficult and maybe aren't the right fit for you, but you can kind of follow the chain and figure out, how could I prevent this from happening in the future? And what happened to cause this? And then you can create a process to be proactive about that same thing happening again and keeping that going. Now, there are some other really great tools I just want to bring up when it comes to helping you get feedback, because it can be really easy for us to not want subscriptions and not want to pay for things. And I get that these things add up, but these are some tools in my business that I use that really help get feedback on things. And I think too, it levels you up as a service provider. When you have good tools and good things, it makes people go, oh, like, I love working with these people. I mentioned Frame. That's what I use for video feedback. You can also like give feedback on PDFs or images or things like that, using Frame as well. I love a tool called Markup, and Markup allows you to upload web pages or link a web page and provide inline feedback on a web page. So rather than the client having to in an email say, oh, the top image change from this to this, or change section 2 to this, like, they're able to just like click on something and leave their feedback directly in Markup. This is hugely efficient for us for review of web pages and funnels and those types of things. I love Monday.com. We've talked about that, but if you're doing ongoing work, it's a great place to store all of those conversations, the back and forth, the decisions. You can have everything in one place for the client so that you have that feedback loop all documented and everybody has access to it. I also use a lot of Google Docs. So Google Docs for reviewing content and copy are really effective. You can share it with the client where they can only add suggestions or only add comments. Google Docs also provides version history. So if a document gets messed up, you can go back to an older version. But finding the right tools to help with your review process is really going to help that communication.
Joanna does a lot more client communication than I do since my business has shifted to digital products. So I am not taking on consistent, regular one-on-one clients. So the steps are going to be a lot more intensive from that perspective. If you're an agency, freelancer, service provider who's doing that type of thing, I've taken the alternative route because as I've shifted away from consulting and done for you service more to coaching, it's made my onboarding process like a lot more simple and a lot more loose. And it's okay to go that direction too, depending on where you're at. But I will say from a digital product perspective, I've gotten a lot more intense about the details and the steps because as I'm automating things and what they're going through from my landing page to the opt-in to the delivery of the lead magnet to how they're going through that lead magnet to the nurture series that goes along with it to the pages that I'm taking them to for sales to the videos to everything that's a part of that process is still super important. And that's kind of part of your onboarding process. So again, thinking about it where you are in your business, the type of service product delivery that you're offering, all of these principles can apply. The tools might look a little bit different, but your systems are going to meet wherever you're at with this, just as long as, again, you are clear about it, you can simplify it, and so that the experience of your consumer is positive. And whether you need to test that with a friend, a family member, a coach, a mentor, a consultant, one of us, I'm happy to just go through your opt-in process and say, hey, this link isn't working. I didn't get this delivery here. Make this change, make this update. It's so simple and so easy, but sometimes it's really hard as the individual to see those things. So getting some sort of third-party perspective about that onboarding process can be super helpful and valuable.
You bring up such a great point because all of the steps we're going through is in that perspective of a one-on-one client or an agency client or something like that. But all of these stages work for a digital product. There's an onboarding process. There's setting expectations. There's helping them through their journey. There's getting feedback, getting testimonials. All of this is part of the process. And in a digital product, it's just going to be automated. But you can imagine if you go sign up for a course and you never get an email about how to access that course, you're not going to be a happy customer because you're not going to know how to access your course. So actually testing your purchase process, thinking through that customer journey for a digital course is just as important and something you do have to iterate on, right? If you start a program, you think you've done everything and everybody's super confused and you're getting all these support questions oh, where is that thing? Then clearly you need to do something in your process to make it more obvious where that thing is. So you have fewer, customer service inquiries. So just thinking through that process and making sure that communication is great for your automated stuff is just as important. The next thing that I want to chat about in the process is how you communicate and finish a project. So if you're working with someone on a one-off project, just being okay, we're done is not necessarily the way you want to end it. Peace, everything's done. Or sometimes not even saying it's done. You say, hey, I've finished your sales page with all the edits and, here it is. And then they're looks great. And then you just stop. You always want to finish strong and communicate. We always like to send a final wrap-up email. Hey, your project is done. This is what we did. These are all the links. Oftentimes our clients might say hey, can you film a video showing the back end? We might film a Loom video saying here's how you access everything. Here it is in one final piece. So everything is set. I do this for a couple of reasons. One, the client, that's a great service. Here's everything we did for you in one email so that they can access it. It's really good for that. It's also good for you as the service provider to just have that record that you said I did everything. And it's great if you can get them to confirm, yep, everything's done, because people forget. You send, we're done. Someone could come back in 3 months and be you never did that thing. And then you could say oh, hey, on this date, I sent you this email. And then they go, oh, oops, missed that email. So being very clear in that, I think it helps finish that customer journey for you. But it also kind of is a, what do they say? COA? No, CYA. Cover your ass. It kind of just is that final, hey, we did everything that you asked. Here it is. And then you kind of have that communication just in case you need it and a problem arises. The other thing I like to do in that close off process is just kind of think through for you, do you want a review from them? Are you looking for a testimonial? Do you want to bring up a next step for them? Maybe you talked about them needing something else. So depending on where they're at in their journey, you kind of want to think about their next step. So wrap up what you've worked on and then what's that CTA for them next. Now, do not give them 100. It's the same process as an email. If you say, here, wrap up, here's the project wrap up, and can you give me a review? And let's meet about a new project, and buy my digital course, and come to this event. That's too many things, but think of one next step that you can share with that client.
Finishing strong is so important for everything that you want to continue your business. Again, this is for longevity purposes, thinking through how you're really going to support them over time. Exactly what Joanna's saying in terms of what is that next step? How can you help support them more? Do you want a referral? Do you want a testimonial? And just continuing that positive relationship. I've had clients who, even after we've stopped working together, refer people to me over time because the close was so positive, or I'm just reaching out to them. If you have a CRM tool or any type of project management tool, reach out to them over time. Say you close in June. Set a date 2 months later to follow up. Are there any new projects that you have in mind? Hey, I saw this thing and I was thinking about you. I think it would be really beneficial for your business. Or just want to see how you're doing. Happy holidays. That's a nurturing process that's going to continue to build that relationship, which then can grow into other relationships or opportunities. And you never know what that's going to look like. You also just want to maintain good rapport with the people that you work with overall. This community is smaller than you think. And I will say that with people I've worked in the past and circumstances that have come up and that have arisen, I will talk about those people later on if I'm inquired about them, and not in terms of like slander and putting that person down, but speaking candidly about the experience that I had. Oh, yeah, it wasn't the best service, so I wouldn't advise if you're looking for this type of thing. I can direct you to this person instead. So knowing that that's a huge part of your brand, it's a huge part of your business, it's a huge part of what you're offering to the world by having a healthy close with someone that feels good on both sides. It's been a win-win opportunity, and that you can, again, continue to nurture that relationship over time.
Yeah, and creating a really, really great customer journey, creating real steps that people can go through, creating that process really does elevate your brand. And yes, a lot of the communication, we talked about is going to help you have successful client projects, client relationships, but it's a lot of brand building. Brand building doesn't stop on your website. It starts really with what people are going to say about you when you're not there. If I work with a client, this is actually a really funny story. I had a client, we were in the same Facebook group together, and I didn't know. It was like a women in marketing. And someone was asking like, "Oh, does anybody here help people create courses?" And I was like, "Oh, me." And one of my clients replied and was like, "Oh my gosh, we work with Joanna. She's great." That kind of brand building is so important. And the reason she felt that way about us was because we have a process and we take care of the details and we do the things that make her want to go in a Facebook group and like put her name and say, "Oh, work with her. She's great." You want that for your customers, and creating this like great customer journey through great communication is really going to help with that. Well, I hope today you took away at least a few nuggets of things that you can do to improve your communication with clients. Michelle shared this earlier, but your client journey is going to look different based on what you offer, what you do, and you really should iterate on it, right? You're going to start in one stage and then you want to grow efficiencies, figure out how to be more proactive as you learn the issues that come along with your particular service or your particular offer. But the key here is to always be thinking, always be communicating, and always figure out how you can make that system better for you and your clients, and to really create the best customer experience possible.
Thanks for tuning in. Find the link in the show notes to join us in the Her First Collective, a free Facebook group to discuss the podcast, ask questions of our guest experts, and network with a group of female entrepreneurs who value collaboration over competition.
Please subscribe, share, leave a review, and be sure to catch our next episode. What is one thing you can do today to prioritize you in business and life?